and welcome to my video on how to chart your cycle and track your BBT in order to optimize your fertility. My name is Amy and I'm a holistic fertility health coach, and I work with women to understand their cycle and to balance their hormones naturally through diet and lifestyle changes. As a coach, I believe hands down that the BBT chart, cycle chart, is the greatest tool that I can have in my hands, especially at the beginning of a coaching relationship with a client. And that's because after you have a month worth of information, you can look at the chart and you can see how the hormones in a woman's body are working with each other or against each other or out of alignment with each other. In fertility, one of the biggest impacts on your fertility is how well balanced your hormones are. Now, there's lots of factors that can cause your hormones to come out of balance, but today we're going to be talking about what it looks like when they're in balance and a few of the most common things or easier things to see on your chart that you can look for when you are doing your BBT charting. And then we'll also throw in just a quick little how-to at the end in case you've never done this before. This is your first time watching this video and you're like, but how do I get this information? After the why you should do it and what you're looking for segment that starts right now. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so what are we trying to see on a chart? And ultimately, the first place to answer that question is, what is the ideal chart? So if you're charting, what is the chart that you're looking for? And I'm going to explain to you what the ideal or normal chart is, but I want you to understand that there are tons of variations from this that may or may not impact your fertility. And that's where we really want to get that picture and take a look and see exactly if it's something within how your hormones are balancing that you need to be looking for as far as your fertility goes. If you have a perfect cycle or the ideal cycle, then possibly maybe we're looking at male factor or maybe something else as far as your immune system might go. So it can be really good as far as diagnosing possibly a different type of infertility from hormones, because there is that side of things too. Typically they still will show up in your cycle somewhere, but as I said, let's talk about what the ideal is. Okay, so in that perfect world of your cycle, you're going to have a 28-day cycle with roughly a 2 to 7 day of bleeding or a period at the beginning, and then your cycle is broken up into two halves. So the first 14 days of your cycle the first 14 days of your cycle is what's known as the follicular phase, and that's when the follicles on your ovaries are being stimulated in order to mature a single egg so that it can be ovulated, then hopefully meet with the sperm and create a baby. And so that part of your cycle should be 14 days. And in the second phase, called the luteal phase, this is the phase in which the egg is traveling down your fallopian tubes and into your uterus and may or may not be meeting the sperm and attaching to the lining of your uterus to create pregnancy. Your body is producing progesterone. And again, we're looking at this phase of your cycle to also be 14 days. So now that we understand that ideal optimal cycle, the next thing that we need to talk about is what happens when it's not that. And so there are a huge list of things that can be seen on a cycle chart. And I could be here all day trying to walk you through them. But ultimately, if you're looking at your chart and it's not lining up with that ideal and it deviates from that ideal, depending on how it deviates, when it deviates, it may or may not actually impact the fertility of your cycle. and then it might. So there's a couple things I'm going to go over here for you to especially watch for that are most common. And I encourage anyone who is watching this, and maybe I'm not answering the question to what's happening that you're seeing on your chart, to either reach out to me for support on this, or go online, because there's plenty of resources around the information that you need in order to properly analyze your chart. So when you're looking at a chart, as the temperatures progress throughout the month, they stay pretty steady throughout the follicular phase, and then at ovulation day, oftentimes you'll see a bit of a drop. Sometimes you'll miss it depending on when you ovulate in time to when you are taking your temperature. But oftentimes you'll see a bit of a drop, and then over the next 1 to 3 days, you're going to see a climb in temperatures. And what that means is that ovulation has occurred and that progesterone is being produced by the corpus luteum, which is what's left behind after the egg is released in your ovary, and that progesterone has a warming effect in your body. And so that temperature shift tells us that you have ovulated. The other thing that we want to look for is that progesterone number, once it rises, stays really high. So if it struggles to stay high and drops or comes down, you might be looking at either progesterone deficiency or a estrogen dominant situation. There'll be other symptoms that would come with the estrogen dominance that we would also see in your chart, and we would backtrack that to heavy cycles or heavy painful cycles and that sort of thing. So temperature is very important on this journey. And then if you don't, so that's one of the reasons we want to see that temperature shift. The other reason that we're looking for that temperature shift is because if it doesn't happen, it means you haven't ovulated. So you can go to the doctor and you can get blood work to confirm or deny that you've ovulated. But ultimately, every month you can do this just by watching what your chart is doing, which is really powerful. So if you want to know you've ovulated, that's pretty fantastic. It can't tell us whether your tubes are blocked, but that would be something, again, if your cycle is optimal and we can't see from your cycle where the imbalance is, that would be something else that you would investigate, is the blocked tubes. The other thing that we want to look for is the timeline. So I said the ideal was 14 days and 14 days. So longer or shorter of either one of those halves of those cycles can point to other clues as to what's going on with your fertility. So in your follicular phase, if that phase is too short and ovulation is happening too early, that means that your egg isn't getting a chance to mature. So even if it does meet the sperm, the chances of it becoming an embryo is very unlikely. So what you want to do then is take steps to slow down ovulation so that the egg has a chance to mature. Now, if your follicular phase is too long, we might be looking at you struggling to produce the sex hormones needed to create ovulation. So again, another strategy would be needed to increase your estrogen and your follicle stimulating hormone. Ultimately, if you have a longer follicular phase, as long as you ovulate, the chances of that egg being fertilized by the sperm is still the same as an egg in another cycle. You're just getting less opportunities in a year because your follicular phase is longer. The other thing that can happen is that you don't ovulate at all, and it can be a very, very, very long time between your last period and ovulation. So what the chart can tell us when we're paying attention to fertile signs is if your body's trying to ovulate and just not being able to get there, or not trying. And again, lifestyle changes and diet, possibly some supplements would be needed in this to encourage ovulation to happen naturally. Now, the luteal phase is the least variable of the two different phases in a woman's cycle. In that ideal cycle, it's 14 days, and very rarely does it go much longer than 14 days. As long as you know when your true ovulation day was, it very rarely will surpass that 14 days. But what we do see is that it can be shorter, and sometimes quite a bit shorter. And the problem with that is sometimes if your progesterone hasn't peaked and it drops too soon, you will actually start your period and shed the lining of your uterus. And if there was an implanted egg in there, it will come out with your period. So it's very important that we pay attention to that the length of that phase of our cycle. And if it is shorter than 13 days, I think it's very important that you start adding in some progesterone support, talk to your doctor, lifestyle changes in order to increase the progesterone in your body so that you can hold back the period long enough for your body to recognize it's pregnant. So those are some of the key things that you want to be looking at when you are charting and trying to see in your cycle. Again, you can really understand now why this information can be so powerful when you look at what are some of the things that you can see without blood work just by looking at what your cycle is doing. So let's quickly, I'm just going to run through 2 minutes on how to actually BBT. So in case you're not doing it, you've just heard about it for the first time here, or have heard about it and just want to try it, I'm just going to simplify this as much as I can for you. And honestly, just get started. That's all I can say. You don't understand how to read it quite yet. You don't understand what you're looking at. That's fine. Ultimately, the more information you have as you learn how to understand it, the better it is for you to be able to go back and reflect on. Okay, so now that we have talked all about why you should be charting your cycle and using BBT as a tool to understand your fertility, let's talk about how to do it. So you really only need 3 things in order to do this properly. And one of them is going to be a thermometer. You can't chart your basal body temperature without a thermometer. So the super simple one that is available to you is less than $15 on Amazon is a thermometer that's digital, and it reads to the 2 decimal points to make sure that we're getting really sensitive and accurate information. And then there are a couple other options here with thermometers I'm going to mention, because sometimes people don't chart because they are shift workers or they are restless sleepers and are getting really inconsistent readings, and it's hard to understand what's happening. And so those 2 different devices, one is called the OvuSense, and it is inserted vaginally before bed, and throughout the night it takes temperature readings every 5 minutes to create an average, and then you can literally download that information straight to your phone by Bluetooth. It's pretty spectacular, great for anybody who is forgetful. The second one that I'd like to talk about is the Temp Drop. Now, this is a wearable temperature device that you wear for a good portion of the day. And again, it takes your average temperature within the span of wearing it and then moves that information into a chart. So that's also the one that is most recommended for people who do shift work, because you're so up and down at weird times throughout the day. So that average of a day in whole is what is needed to create a chart that shows the proper flow of what's happening in your body. So that's the thermometer device. The second thing that you're going to want to order or buy is OPK, ovulation prediction strips. And what they do is measure the amount of LH in your urine, which will tell you how close to ovulation you are. And when you're about to ovulate will be shown, and that's pretty powerful information because that's the best time for you to baby dance and make a baby. And then the last thing that you're going to need is an app. Now, there is a ton out there, but for me, I just love the super basic Fertility Friend. It's free. It has all of the information that you need to chart all of the information you need on your chart. So I love it, and simple, easy, like I said. There's some pretty deluxe ones out there these days. I know that the OvuSense comes with a pretty in-depth app, but that's up to you, whatever you choose to do. I just stick with Fertility Friend because I like things simple. And then, now you have everything that you need to chart your BBT. So you're just going to wake up the next morning, and as soon as you wake up, before you get out of bed, you're going to insert your thermometer, if that's the route you went with, into your vagina, and take a temperature. And we go with the vagina because, well, mouth breathing. If you are a person that sometimes sleeps with your mouth open, sometimes sleeps with it shut, the temperature of the room can have an impact on what your BBT reads. Well, that isn't the case down below. So it's a very stable and accurate temperature for you to read every day. So that would be step one, is take the temperature, and then you're going to move that information into your chart. Just take that temperature and enter it into your chart, and then go about your day. With cycle charting, there is the next step though. So it's not just taking the reading, although that's very powerful and a lot of the information that we are looking for is on there. The other things that we want to be charting are your fertile window signs. And so you're going to be watching for your cervical mucus to be changing. So as you approach ovulation, you're going to increase the amount of cervical fluid you have. And the day leading up to ovulation, or sometimes 2 days before ovulation, you're going to be having egg white cervical mucus. And it looks like egg whites. You can't miss it when you're having that fertile cervical mucus. And that information you also want to start plucking into your fertility friend. So whether as you notice it's happening, just pull out your phone and enter that information, or before bed, just ask yourself, did I have any things I want to put on here? Some people go as far as to chart their mood from day to day, cravings for food, and they like to write down when they baby dance. You now know how to BBT temp take, and you put it in your chart, and you know what other information to put in your chart. The third step in this, I talked about those OPK strips. So what are you doing with them? Well, once you hit either cycle day 10 or you start seeing the changes to your cervical mucus, whatever day that happens to be on, you're going to pull out the OPK strips and you're going to start testing with them. You will follow the directions of whatever type of OPK strip you got, because they are all different a little bit. And when you start seeing the egg white cervical mucus, then I would recommend that you are using the OPK strips twice a day to make sure that you don't miss your LH surge. Because LH surge tells you that ovulation is happening within 12 to 36 hours. So you need to make sure you're getting on the baby dancing right away. This is your 100% most fertile moment in the entire cycle, is when you get that peak OPK strip. So today, tomorrow, baby dance. And then when you are going through the second half of your cycle and you're in the luteal phase, you also want to be charting any spotting that you're getting. So if you spot with ovulation, you're going to want to write that down. If you cramp with ovulation, you want to write that down. And then in that second half of the cycle, anytime you're spotting, if you have digestive issues, especially right before your period, that'll be something you're going to want to record, because again, that's another symptom. So you can start this at any point in the cycle. You just won't have a full cycle picture until you've completed a full cycle of charting. Now, just on a note about the mental side of this, some women find BBT charting to be stressful. And I can understand why it can be, because when you're looking at the chart and you don't understand what you're looking for, or it's not lining up the way you think it should, it can be stressful. But what I want to really stress here is that knowledge is power. And when we have a BBT chart and we're able to look at it and we're able to analyze it, we can truly see where your fertility is at. You can get blood work, then at that point you can walk into your doctor's office and be completely empowered and say, this is where I believe I need to be tested, because I feel like this is what's not working right in my body, and be very capable of advocating for yourself because you have the information. But you have to be committed to getting the information and understanding why it's so important. And you don't have to do it forever. You can just do it for 1 or 2 months, maybe 3, to see where it's at, what it looks like, and then you can stop. Period. If you hate doing it, then you can stop. You will know at that point what your body is needing from you. You can make those shifts necessary to improve your cycle. But then if you're a nerd like me, you might feel like it might be fun that as you implement those changes in your life to watch how your cycle improves month to month. Because I think that would be really exciting, because as that cycle improves, that means you're getting closer to fertile or more fertile and more likely to be conceiving because of what your body's doing. So that's it. That is why you should BBT and how to BBT. And I think that ended up being a way bigger video than I thought it would be, because I'm looking at how much camera footage is on here and I'm like, whoa. Anyways, I hope you're having a great day, and check out check out in the description below to find a link to my Facebook group where I support women on their TTC journey. And I will see you in my next video, and hit the like button down below because you got a lot out of this video, and subscribe to the channel to get more helpful tips and tricks on your TTC journey, and I will see you next time.